This video is meant to spread the word and give an overall summary of the podcast. Research done by Brookings Podcast. Between Madihah Afzal and Adrianna Pita. Podcast is called What's Happening in Afghanistan 1 year after the U.S. withdrawal. August 30th marks 1 year since U.S. forces withdrew from Afghanistan, followed shortly by the collapse of the Afghan government and the return of Taliban control over the country. In 1 year, the Taliban have been struggling to transition from an insurgency to being in charge of Afghanistan. Part of this is because that is what the Taliban's foot soldiers were used to for the last 20 years fighting. The country doesn't have a functional economy, which has also hindered the Taliban. The way the structure of government works is that there are divisions among the Taliban, and the more hardline factions have been winning out recently. This includes decisions like not allowing girls to attend a secondary school, which came from the Emir in Kandahar. So on many decisions, we've seen the Taliban revert to its old ways, which were more extreme than before. In the workplace, women have largely retreated from government offices, but other activities, like protests, still occur. There are restrictions on civil society in terms of protests, but there are still brave Afghan women and girls who come out to protest despite the risks they face. While everything is very different and has regressed, especially in the urban areas, some factions of society are still displaying resilience and trying to push back on the hard-line nature of Taliban rule. The Taliban made a promise in March that they would send girls to secondary school, but at the last minute a decree was issued from Kandahar stating that girls are not allowed to attend secondary school. Girls are still allowed to attend university. Women continue to face many barriers when working in the formal sector, but this is slowly changing. Women are now largely segregated from the general population, having to wear full clothing and cover themselves when in public. This has had a major impact on their lives, as many have had to stop working or have had their careers limited. There are still some informal mechanisms for women to access education, but these are rare and increasingly difficult to find. In addition, conferences are almost always segregated by gender, limiting women's ability to participate fully in society. There are still upwards of 70,000 special people who were in line for special immigrant visas waiting, and about 10,000 of them have a pretty high level of approval. However, even for those who have been evaluated through this program, first we saw withdrawal being chaotic. We saw the scenes at the airport last year. Some of them were separated from their families in the effort to evaluate, and so some of them have families still in Afghanistan and are separated. Members of their immediate family live separated from them. And then there are also these stories of those who have settled in the West struggling because essentially, the life they knew is over. So even for those who have been evaluated, who have managed to make it out, life is quite tough, and they have to find a way to work. They have to find a way to make ends meet. They have to find a way to have a productive life. So, even for them, the story is not simple. There are concerns that they will not be able to rebuild their lives in the West once they leave. Another concern that arose as the U.S. was withdrawing last year was about what would happen to the many Afghans who had worked closely with the U.S. military, with international agencies, and with the Afghan government. So, the U.S. had their special immigrant visas, and I'm sure other countries also had some of their own similar programs. Many of the concerns about Afghanistan over the last year, such as the humanitarian crisis, the issue of special immigrant visas, and the Russian war in Ukraine, faded away after the last troops withdrew in late 2014. This may have caused less attention to be paid to Afghanistan, especially with the Russian war in Ukraine and other crises happening at the same time. This has had a negative impact in Afghanistan, including fewer special immigrant visas being issued and more Afghans suffering from the humanitarian crisis. One thing that has been happening is that the West has been providing humanitarian aid. For example, only about half of the amount that the United Nations has called for. The UN launched its largest ever humanitarian appeal, and that was for Afghanistan. However, the decision not to send girls who had come out as a result of the appeal likely decreased the amount of nations that donated. However, humanitarian assistance was still able to help avert a humanitarian crisis in most cases. Another struggle that we have seen is that the West was slow to ease sanctions so that aid could reach Afghans. In order to better the lives of the Afghan people, a clear conversation needs to take place about whether our current policies are hurting them or the Taliban.
Thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe.